I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. This is a joint meeting with the Planning Commission for Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. Madam Clerk, would you please take the roll?
I will. I'll start out with the assembly. I'm not sure if Tim Hale is going to be calling in. Stephanie Nowers.
Here.
Dee McKee is supposed to be calling in. Is she on the phone? Maxwell Sumner.
Here.
Bill Gamble.
Here.
Dimitri Bonoff.
Here.
Ron Bernier, I'm expecting, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Doug Glenn is not going to be present. Richard Allen.
Here.
Brendan Carpenter.
Here.
Michael Collins will not be present. Lynn McCabe.
Here.
Max, I'm sorry. You're going to have to correct. You're going to have to correct me. Maxim Zagroundney. Did I do it?
Close enough. Here.
Kurt Scoggin.
Here.
Madam Mayor, you do have a quorum for both bodies.
Okay, thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, then the agenda is approved. If you'll all stand, please, and Chairman Allen, if you will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item on the agenda is audience participation. I guess we do not have a sign-up sheet, so anybody that would like to address the assembly, you're welcome to come forth at this time. Okay, come on.
You could also turn on the mic too.
Good evening, everyone. I didn't think 400 pages was enough, so there's a copy of my statement in front of you as well. My name's Rod Hanson. I'm president of the North Lakes Community Council. Thank you for the time that you're spending on this critically important study and its recommendations, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on the subject. One of the highest priorities of our 60-plus council members and roughly 10,000 area residents is this inadequate transportation infrastructure to support the current and forecasted level of development within our boundaries. The NLCC has reviewed prior long-range planning documents like the 2017 Long-Range Transportation Plan, which was supposed to paint a picture for 2035, the Sub-Area Solution Studies, and the Official Streets and Highways Plan. We provided input on the Safe Streets Plan, the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan, and then most recently, significant input into the Bogard-Selden Camp. We understand this study draws significantly from those prior planning efforts. On behalf of the Community Council, I started a review of the study, and I'm looking forward to getting it shared out to our members and residents, and ultimately providing you with some more comprehensive feedback. I do hope one of tonight's outcomes is an ongoing commitment to engage and seek public input as this moves forward. I am encouraged by my initial cursory review. It's clear to me the team that put this study together understands the value of proactive planning and the value of adjusting borough codes and processes to be consistent with this extensive growth that we see now and what lies ahead. We appreciate the generally, what I would characterize, I guess, as conservative and limited government approach of the current Assembly and Planning Commission. And we must also accept the fact that we are in a very fast-growing and developing borough. The lack of land use controls, the lack of road powers, the lack of even limited zoning represent significant gaps and really don't serve the greater public good. There are numerous examples where commercial or multifamily development has occurred without the ability of the planning board to even ask about land use and assure that new roads and existing intersections will handle the realistic traffic increases as a result of those developments. Borough residents need an active government that is focused on a 20-year horizon. We will provide our council feedback once we've had an opportunity to review by our members and residents. Initially, I looked through and I think there's some excellent recommendations in this community growth solution study. Based on recent observations, I'm a little concerned you may quickly reject many of those recommendations without really fully considering the long-range impacts. These issues warrant some very, I think, thoughtful debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address the assembly on any issue? Doesn't have to be something that's on the agenda or the planning commission. Okay, see no one. Do we have anybody online? We do not. Okay. I'll go ahead and close audience participation. And our joint item of business is a community growth solution study. It was requested by the administration, and looks like we have staff all there ready to go.
Okay,
So go ahead, sir.
yeah. Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly, Alex Strawn, Planning Director. So it's with great pleasure that I sort of attend these and these Planning Commission and Assembly meetings. I think they're a great way for planning department and sometimes the Public Works Department to sort of show off what they've been working on. And this project has been a pretty major project that has taken up a lot of staff time over the past couple of years. So I'm glad that we're finally at this point where I can share it with you and the things are inside of it. So this project is called the Community Growth Solutions Study. It is formally known as the Sub-Area Solution Study. So it's not two different studies. It's the same thing. It's been rebranded. So HDR was the contractor that we hired to do this project. In the middle of the project, their project manager moved on and our project manager moved on. So on both sides, we had to sort of pick up the pieces and carry the torch. And in doing so, we also rebranded it because, we just thought this was a more appropriate name for the project. So I will say that I am not proposing, this is a study. I'm not proposing that this be adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. My intent is to bring this forward at a future assembly meeting after we make a couple of minor adjustments and just bring it forward as an informational memorandum. This is everything in the kitchen sink, as Nick put it, of different solutions and strategies that we could potentially, whether you're an assembly member or a planning director, we're all going to be, it could be a different planning director here in a couple of years. It could be a different assembly member here or a planning commissioner in a few years. So this will be lay out all the possible solutions to our growth struggles that we have so that bits and sort of like a menu or a buffet where an assembly member can pick bits and pieces of it and bring it forward to try to address some of our solutions or some of our problems. What did you do? Oh, is it this one? Okay, all right. Thanks.
You again, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks, Caleb. So this project was originally it's paid for by our federal earmark. It went through the state of Alaska to the Mat-Su Borough. We then put out an RFP and ended up hiring HDR to do this project. And really the idea was to identify transportation-related problems that we have associated with growth that can be addressed through different solutions and strategies. So here's here's the stated study goals. So, so this has 4 different sub areas that were initially identified that required further study. The first one is the corridor that is the Bogard-Selden corridor. That midway through the project took a life of its own. It was such a big, hairy monster that we separated it out, and that's what became known as the Bogard Corridor Access Management Plan, which came through the Planning Commission to the Assembly and was adopted. So that leaves us with 3 different sub areas that are within this report right here. So if you read all 400 some pages, you'll see that there's existing conditions report for each of the 3 sub areas, and it essentially gives a snapshot of the struggles, the things that are going good for these areas, the demographics, the what can be improved upon, just basically getting a snapshot of the existing conditions in these particular areas. They then did an assessment and technical analysis, and then the study results and recommendations are what is in this packet here today. So early on, they held a large charrette where it was at the Wasilla Library, and it was completely packed. It was very well attended, and it had a various group of different stakeholders. Had developers and business owners, all sorts of different stakeholders were there, and they all kind of formed in different little groups and talked about solutions and problems. And then there was separate interviews with all these different people. And then a steering committee and project team were formed consisting of the Borough Public Works, Borough Planning, and the state of Alaska. And we sort of worked with the contractor to kind of compile this stuff and steer the direction it goes in a little bit. Throughout the process, the focus areas in the strategic plan that was adopted in 2023 were kept in mind and referenced throughout the document, which is economic growth and diversification, delivering high quality services, and managing growth. So I'm going to touch on all these things, all these topics on this slide right here later on in the presentation, but this is sort of the overarching growth-related issues that we have in the borough, whether you're in a sub-area or not in the sub-area. So limited roadway and subdivision connections, poor functionality of key road corridors around schools, and especially during drop-off and pickup of during schools. And I will say that a lot of the stuff we already kind of know, but this is kind of putting it all into a document so that anybody can pick it up and identify what our issues are. Land use regulations, it's always been a hot topic. They talk about what I refer to as the platting and land use disconnect, which I think everybody knows, when somebody goes to do a subdivision, they do not have to disclose what their future land use is going to be. And so often roads are underbuilt or classified incorrectly because what was submitted as single family residential doesn't always occur. Sometimes it's multifamily or commercial, and we don't have any idea of that during the subdivision process. And then limited facilities for pedestrians and bicycles is one of the things they recognize as being a thing we struggle with. So one of their big recommendations is to strengthen our transportation planning process. And this graph right here was developed by the steering committee. So the way we've done planning in the somewhat recent future is without a traffic demand model. We haven't had a traffic demand model for, I think, over 15 years. So we use local knowledge, and we use sort of somewhat common sense as to where future road corridors are going to go. So when we developed the official streets and highways plan, we're following section line easements that are undeveloped. We're looking at places that are undeveloped and taking the path of least resistance. When we actually go to put a road project on the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, for voter approval, it is really good to have a model that shows we've run this model, and if we were to build this corridor, it would divert X amount of traffic onto that road, because road construction is very expensive. So we want to know that that road that we're building is going to be utilized by a lot of traffic if we're going to build it, that it's actually going to have utility. So they suggest that having a traffic demand model is your first step in doing transportation planning. And I will say that there are two different efforts going on right now. The state of Alaska is developing a traffic demand model, and so is the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So there's two different efforts going right now. So that should be helpful to us in our transportation planning. It's recommended that we sort of update those every 5 years or so. So that feeds the OSHIP, which identifies future road corridors, which then feeds the long-range transportation plan, which prioritizes those road corridors. The great thing about this study, if you don't like anything else in it, one of the things it does is it actually prioritizes the official streets and highways plan, the future road connections in the official streets and highways plan. Yes.
So I actually had a question about that. I saw that there was criteria applied for how you prioritized, or how these were prioritized. Number one, the criteria was environmental, acres of impacted wetlands. Then there's population, safety, mobility, land use, quality of life, and economic impact. I didn't see cost anywhere. Was there a reason why they left cost out?
So I don't have the answer to that. I will say that impacting wetlands probably has a higher cost than other, if you're high and dry, it's going to have a lot lower cost in impacting wetlands. If you're filling in lakes or whatever it may be. But I was not a part of that methodology, but that's the methodology they used. And I think, so getting a good planning level cost estimate requires recon studies, which brings us to the next part of this. So, prioritizing the connectors in the long-range transportation plan, or in the official streets and highways plan, feeds the long-range transportation plan, which is a prioritized list of road projects, which is where we get our road projects that eventually go on to a tip for voter approval. So once those are prioritized, then the next step is to do recon studies so we can get high level planning cost estimates. It's really frustrating when we put like $10 million to construct a road, it gets approved by voters, and then it ends up being $20 million. I think that's frustrating for everybody. And some of that's unavoidable, but certainly having recon studies really gives us a better idea of how much these things are going to cost so we can put them before the voters. And then right-of-way acquisition need identified, preferably early on. And I've advocated, and it is talked about in this document of actually having maybe like an annual right-of-way acquisition budget. And the problem is we do not have road power, so we can't just go buy right-of-way unless we have a voter-approved road project. So one solution that is recommended in here is to have a ballot initiative or something on the ballot that would give the borough limited road powers solely for the purpose of right-of-way acquisition outside of an existing project. So what this would do, there's a lot of times where we have somebody come to do a subdivision development, and we have identified that this is there's an important future road corridor going through maybe the north end of this property. We would really like to retain like 50 feet or 100 feet of right-of-way, whatever it may be. If we had the power to do so and the money to do so, we could negotiate the acquisition of that right-of-way without, it would be good for everybody. It would not be a taking. They'd be compensated for it, and it would preserve our future road corridors. The alternative is the subdivision gets built out and it may have houses where that future right-of-way would be. So it could either kill any future right-of-way corridor or future road corridor, or it may just make it very, very expensive. So that is one of the recommendations in there. And then of course, once it goes to the voters and they approve it, then you have the high-level design where you get more detailed cost estimate. So that's the recommendation for revamping our transportation process planning. So disconnected subdivisions, you can't see it when you're driving. You're just driving on roads. You can't see that 200 feet down the way, if you're just able to go straight through the woods, you'd be in a completely different area of the borough. I think everybody who's been here for a while, before Bogard East was built between Colony and High School, I always felt if I was driving from Palmer over to, say, Schrock area, I always had to go in this weird circuitous way, and it just didn't feel good. And it's more time on the road, more wear and tear on my vehicle, and then more pressure on the road system. So the most efficient road system is one that is well interconnected. And so we have done not the best job of requiring subdivisions to connect to others. I will say in the past few years, we have done a much better job. But there are some recommendations to Title 43 and the subdivision construction manual that would make the rules stronger on requiring connectivity between subdivisions. So walkability near schools is an issue. About a third of our schools, even if you live right next door, your kids may not be able to safely walk to that school. And I think that kids walking to school uphill both ways is sort of an American pastime. And I think that our schools should have the ability for us to walk to it. So they have recommendations on our school site selection process, having a greater emphasis on off-site impacts to transportation. Of course, we have our Safe Routes to Schools program where we are making these maps and sharing them with the school system on recommended pathways for students to walk or not walk because it's too dangerous.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So we do have our Safe Routes to Schools program. I hear a lot about Shaw Elementary, Colony, Pioneer Peak. Pretty much any school we have, it seems like we haven't done a great job thinking about safety there. But so how would this, if we have a Safe Routes to Schools program, like how does that, are you just saying we have that? That's not part of this plan here. Are you talking about specific changes that are mentioned in this plan that would affect and improve that?
Yeah. So all of these topics I am kind of covering very briefly, but there are specifics. Specifically for this one, one of the recommendations they have is that if you're doing a development that requires road building within like half mile of a school, that you have some sort of accommodation for pedestrians. And I think sidewalks are very expensive and they require extra drainage controls that may raise the cost a lot, but perhaps maybe just a wider shoulder in those areas, whatever it may be. We do have a provision in Title 43 that talks about pathways if you're in close proximity to a school. But certainly as one of the options that the Assembly could consider would be to strengthen that for developments near schools. So I talked about strengthening the planning process, following the OSHIP. Let's see. So the Borough Public Works Department is working on a design criteria manual, but they're recommending that's a good effort and we should continue that. And that essentially is, right now we have standards for roads associated with subdivisions. This, for one, would create a standard for roads that are borough road projects or even part of a construction permit within a right-of-way. So it's in process right now and ultimately would clearly define how roads are going to look in the borough if it were to get adopted. And we do have Mike Campfield in the back, who is a big part in authoring that. And then we also have Fred Wagner in the back. If you have questions about the subdivision construction manual or Title 43, he's our local expert on that stuff. They do recommend a complete streets policy, which essentially is building streets for not just motorists, but bicyclists, pedestrians, people pushing strollers, or whatever it may be. They recommend continuing the Vision Zero policy in education. So that's the Safe Streets for All Community Safety Action Plan that was recently adopted. Let's see. And then corridor access management is a big one. So we just did one for one corridor, and it was a doozy. They're recommending that we have a corridor access management plan for anything greater than a major collector. And then in every single sub area, they actually prioritized which of those you should do first. So I would say we did the hardest one of them all. Any other future corridor access management plan would be easier and less controversial than the one we just did. So, and then they have recommendations for coordinating with various groups such as utility companies, which we already do. They said we should update our comprehensive plans. Admittedly, they're all getting pretty old right now, and we're of course in the midst of developing our borough-wide comprehensive plan. So some more land use planning type recommendations, and they call these non-infrastructure options, is bring back the mandatory land use permit. They have, I think in his appendix, they have all these specific recommendations for updates to Title 43 and which is our plating regulations, and then our subdivision construction manual, which is tied into our plating regulations. Land use control zoning, they talk about what I lovingly refer to as the plating and land use disconnect, and then I'll get into it later. It's the last one, foster development nodes. They've identified key intersections that are potentially important economic generators. And I think the example I like to use is Four Corners, the corner of Palmer-Wasilla Highway and Trunk Road, that in all likelihood is going to be built out with multifamily housing and commercial, which is what we want. But it doesn't necessarily have to happen like that, and we kind of hope and pray that it does. But somebody could just buy that up and put their single family residence and put a big gate and fence around it and call it good. So if these are developed correctly, they could become even little towns eventually, communities. And so they recommend that we have more land use controls on those, not necessarily like, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. It doesn't have to be super restrictive. They do mention impact fees, which, I don't think that it's politically palatable to have impact fees, but a lot of municipalities do it. Essentially, it is a way to, when people do developments that they have to pay into, they have to pay, and that money would ultimately be used for improving the transportation network. And the idea is that it's they're the ones sort of putting the strain on the network itself, and that they should have a bigger stake in paying for the improvement or maintenance of those networks. So I have not gone deep into traffic impact fees, but I know a lot of different municipalities do it throughout the nation. Let's see. So this is just a high flyover of the different development nodes. They classified it as 3 different types of nodes: regional, tourism, and neighborhood. And they have a whole, if you've read this, they go deep into what these different types of nodes mean, and some are combinations of different nodes. I'm just going to very kind of quickly go over the different economic development nodes that they identified in this plan or in this study. There's the Hatcher Pass Gateway node, and they have, some of these have common recommendations. I think all of them, they recommend that additional zoning controls be put on these areas. But some of them are more specific, like apparently this one has a lot of moose strikes. So they talk about, the Palmer fish hook having, doing a better job of protecting from moose collisions, whether it's like trimming the vegetation on the edge or adding lighting or whatever it may be. There's the Big Lake, so Parks Highway and Big Lake Cutoff, Big Lake Town Center. There's the Settlers Bay node, which it's obviously going to be developed as commercial, but it also has issues with one way in, one way out. Selden and Church node. This is one that the borough owns a lot of land there, and so we actually have some control over how that's going to be developed in the future. But the Alaska Mental Health Trust also is a very large landowner right at that spot. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that area over the years. And we actually have more control over that than most big intersections like this. The Trunk Road node, we identify specific issues with that. That if we want to go into any of these, we sure can. The Bogard-Selden node, I think it's also known as the mini roundabout. The UMed, it's kind of two nodes in one. And we'll go a little bit into this area and their specific recommendations. We're going to go into the three different sub areas. So the first one is the Fishhook Triangle. Right now the big elephant in the room is everybody's diverted to one intersection, which is a really terrible intersection. It's our worst intersection in the valley. That's going to have a bit of a fix with the roundabout. But in order to really get people where they need to go in a good amount of time, we're trying to find different ways out of this triangle. We are constructing Texal. It identifies some of the north-south corridors that need to be built out, Covington and Raleigh Hills, North Ingstrom, and then it talks about essentially prioritization of roads that need to be constructed in this area, and so this is the prioritization of future road corridors identified in the official streets and highways plan. So they took all these different roads and projected out to 2045. So 20 years out, what is the level of service going to be on these roads? And so if you don't know level of service when it is associated with roads, it's kind of like a report card. An A is good. It's like safe and there's free flowing traffic. And an F is bad. It's usually an F, it's just so slow, it's congested, or maybe there's a lot of traffic accidents. So they projected out what the level of service would be in 20 years and then developed their priorities based on that, as well as, I think, the criteria that Sumner was referring to, which is in one of the appendices. So I included this we're going to kind of go through these. I included this in the PowerPoint so you can have a quick reference to your particular district. And so here's the prioritization results based on the matrix that they developed for how to prioritize which roads need to be improved or built. And here is a visualization of that same list on a map. And they did this for all the areas. And then these are the roads that they recommended be given a corridor access management plan. They're saying do all the ones over major collector, but these are the first priority ones. The next study area is the UMed district. And one of the big issues they identified with this, let's see, so first of all, they identified corridor access management, and you'll notice that a lot of these are state highways. So of course, any corridor access management plan that we do would have to be in close coordination with the state of Alaska. Here's the level of service for 2045. So one thing that they did say is a big strong point for this district is that they actually have water out to that area. So because they have piped water from the city of Palmer, they could build out more dense than other areas within the borough. And we want density. That leads to affordable housing and more bang for your buck when it comes to maintenance of your roads. So less cost per road mile to maintain, more dense tax base. But they also recommended that be further developed, that water system. And then a big issue that they identified in this area was hospital access. Apparently, I guess I missed it somehow, or maybe I forgot it, but Apparently the roundabout there, if that goes down, if there's an accident in that roundabout, then ambulances can't get to that hospital. And so they definitely strongly recommend that we develop some sort of alternative access to that hospital for redundancy. And they go through different options. Option one, you'll be able to see on your screen, is essentially have a path out to the Glen Highway. Option two is to essentially you'd have to put a light or a roundabout there on Trunk Road, which wouldn't be very popular because that's like a pretty free flowing traffic there, but it sure would be popular for the people who live there in Dutchess, so they can actually take a left out of their neighborhood. But so it would connect, I forget which road this is, but I think it's Cortrell Campus or Dutchess. So different alternatives for connecting, and they actually recommend you do all of them. So, but yeah, we certainly could go into those details. They talk about a potential north-south connector through the landfill, interestingly enough. And I know that Mike Canfield's in the back of the room, and he is very knowledgeable about all of these different alternatives and what efforts we've already done to study these, and he knows all about that if you want to go into further detail. Finally, there's Knik Goose Bay, Big Lake sub area. I would say the take-home message with this one is a lot of disconnected roads, and a lot of it's due to wetlands in the area, and it's difficult to build. But they're essentially, their existing conditions report is basically saying like we have all these disconnected roads, and they're major roads. So this could, with some future road connections, make this a much more efficient transportation network in this area. Again, they project out the level of service for these different roads in the next 20 years. And then they rank and prioritize the future road corridors. And then they kind of broke, it's such a big area, they broke it into multiple parts. I'm gonna keep cruising through. Same, so they basically broke this sub area into 3 different parts just so for ease of reading the maps. Or maybe it's 4 different parts. And then here's the corridor access management plans that they recommend that we prioritize in this area. And that is my presentation. I was asked to keep it under 30 minutes. I hope I accomplished that. And I would love to answer questions that you have.
Any of the assembly or planning commission members have questions?
I'll ask a
Alderperson
fun
Palmer,
question
go
that I
ahead.
always ask. How much did this study ended up costing us? Not us, but overall the price tag on us was?
Yeah, so I believe it was, so this is the corridor access management plan, and this right here, I believe is around $500,000.
Okay. One of the things I noticed by just scanning through it, because there's no way that I could go through it, but I did analyze a few things. There was a lot of mention and focus on bike, pedestrian, and non-motorized and pathways and that kind of stuff. But living in a borough, I don't see there wasn't any direct mention of any plans to address or to help or kind of navigate for the focus for ATVs, dirt bikes, snow machines, and other off-road vehicles. Their purpose why it's really focused one way and not the other, because to me it looks really one-sided when it comes to those two things, just comparing side by side.
Yeah, I agree that is missing from this document. I think it is important that, you know, people are going to ride their four-wheelers on the side of the road. So, you know, some different municipalities take a hard stance and say you can't be driving on the side of the road, and they block things off. We actually have been, when we have a side street, we'll do a little paved off ramp so that four-wheelers aren't tearing up the road. So it's a question of what approach you want to take. But that is not talked about in this document. You're right.
Yeah, because I remember there was some kind of numbers that were given. I don't remember off the top of my head. There was the previous study we once had, there was a lot of focus on that as well. So it seems to me a little bit. So I would want to treat that same, because that is a something of a high value to residents of Matsu Borough. I mean, if you want to make it an Anchorage, one of the things you can eliminate all those things here, and that could be, will look a lot like that. So I don't think our residents are ready to give that one up. Neither am I. So I'd love to see something that helps to address that thing, because that's going to be around, and I think that's also a priority.
Assemblyperson Powers, go ahead.
So on this main document on page 13, it says, towards the bottom, the second bullet point is the need for serious injury and fatal accident data to help prioritize and build infrastructure improvements. Is there data we're not getting or don't have? Because I know the state keeps some, but what are we missing?
Yeah, so as I've been over the past couple of weeks, I've been, I read this cover to cover. Yeah, that's a good question. As far as I know, we are able to get that data from the troopers in our emergency services department. So that one perplexed me a little bit, why they're recommending or why they're saying that is a shortcoming of ours. So I can certainly follow up and hopefully have a more educated answer on that one.
Okay, yeah, I mean, if that's kind of an important indicator for figuring out which roads are the most dangerous, and I know we have more fatalities than other areas, but based on some other stuff we've gotten. But if you've got follow up on that, that'd be great. And then a couple other questions. You mentioned that we go through plating process. We don't ask what is going to be done with a land use, and then sometimes we do all our calculations based on it being residential single family, and it turns into something else. Can you give a couple examples, and are there does that happen and then all of a sudden you got a dangerous intersection and then the road surface area is trying to figure out what to do about it, or we're just trying to play catch up on that, or maybe describe a couple of examples?
Sure. Yeah. So we do have specific examples. We have one that when they went through the subdivision process, they say, I think it's 10 trips per day or whatever. It's whatever the number is for single family residential. And then every single lot was built out with these detached fourplexes. And if you were to calculate that, then that would actually turn the road that they're accessing onto a collector road instead of just a residential road. And in the case that I'm thinking about in my head, it's there was a curve radii that wouldn't have been allowed. So a tighter corner and a lower speed than would have been allowed had we known it would have been that much traffic on that road. But certainly, I mean, I think there's a lot of examples. And then I guess fire code would be another one that if we knew what the use was going to be prior to the subdivision occurring, if it's going to be, say, high density housing or whatever, or commercial or whatever it may be, there may be different driveway spacing or fire code that applies, that could be the plating board could be informed as to how the design goes with the subdivision.
Okay, one last. So right now, okay, I think I got it. Like we just don't have any way to come back at that point to the developer when it's being developed to say that needs to be a wider road. We just push that cost over onto the road surface area is kind of how I understand it. But my other question is about, and this might be one for Mr. Wagner. I've seen things come before the plating board about neighbors concerned about impacts on their wells or community system because of development going in next to them. And I think the answer I got, like, if you're concerned a big subdivision is going in and maybe that's going to drain my wells, or I don't know. I think this came up on Lazy Mountain because of they have a harder time with water up there. Is there anything in this or in our current plating board process that actually looks at impact on water supply? And if people have concerns about it, there's any sort of analysis at all, or?
So I'll attempt to answer this, and Fred, if I misspeak, come on up, okay? So we have requirements for usable area to ensure that septic systems can be installed, but there is no analysis or consideration of water quality due to more septic systems in that area.
I'm more talking about water supply is what I'm hearing about. And I don't know if the borough has anything in the plating process where somebody says, you know, what's the impact going to be on our wells from this, or if we looked at the water supply in this area, or if DEC or anybody else looks at that.
Thank you, Fred Wagner, Plating Officer for the Madison Borough. To answer your question, Title 43 is silent on the availability of water. We don't have anything in our code. I think this is largely because we have areas in the valley where there isn't water. I mean, you have hard rock, you have all kinds of different ways of getting water to a place. So what our subdivision code really looks at is not, we're more concerned with affluent from septic systems winding up in our aquifers. And that's where we end. We don't do, there is nothing, unless you're going with a community water system, there is nothing in code about water or the availability thereof.
Yeah, just a comment. I think that's something we might, as we're growing, you know, it's not an issue when you have 20 people, but when you have 120,000, and I look at Wessel and they're struggling with their water supply. That's a community system, but listening to, like, on Lazy Mountain, they have to, you know, re-drill wells and stuff. That's a real big expense. I just think that would be good to kind of have some kind of look at that for the borough and identify areas. And, you know, at least it doesn't sound like we looked at it all, and seems like it might be something we need to start getting an eyeball on.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions or comments? No? Are we ready to move on then in the agenda? Yes.
So I guess in the beginning, Alex, you said, so it's come on more of a recommendation or a study, but then you said something along the lines, then we vote on it and things like that, or the borough. So what, I guess after 400 some pages, what is next step, and when do we start kind of what we did in the Bogart corridor, man, where we actually went nitty gritty and modified certain intersections? I mean, when you're talking about something like this that broadly touched a lot of things, but not maybe certain things that doesn't touch at all, what is the year or 2 year or 5 year, where is the next step, and what can maybe we, or as the commissioners, could try to maybe pick their specialty that they can focus on and work directly with your department or whatever, say, hey, this part that I don't like, this is what we need to relook over. What's the path for us to continue and maybe make proper adjustments or improvements to this?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question through the mayor. So a lot of these things are recommendations that can be in this study and never come to fruition, or an assembly member can say, hey, I think that's a great idea, I want to do that. My recommendation would be, as far as next steps, would be to update the Title 43 in the subdivision construction manual. Fred has been accumulating as we had a major revamp a few years ago. It wasn't perfect, and as we've gone through different cases, he's noted different issues associated, that come up that are flaws in our code. So some of them are really just cleanup fixes. Then there's other fixes that are more substantive, and that would, every ordinance requires an assembly member as a champion, or the mayor or the manager. So my recommendation would be if somebody wanted to champion an ordinance that would fix Title 43, we can kind of pick and choose which ones we want to bring forward, but certainly some of them would be appealable to everybody. And then as well as updates to the subdivision construction manual. We did do the prioritization of the official streets and highways plan. So I think that will be very useful in the next time we put together a transportation improvement program package. So if nothing else comes out of this, that's very useful to us next time we put together one of those packages. And then there's other things that might not be controversial that is just a great idea that'll make us more efficient. Like, for instance, the limited road powers, I think would be a really good stride. Then we can be more nimble, and when subdivisions occur, we can acquire the right of way that we're going to need for future road corridors. Other than that, as assembly members take interest in these different things, we can certainly develop ordinances, explore the facts, and put it together for the assembly to consider.
Any further discussion, or are we ready to do parting comments? Okay, I guess we're ready to do parting comments. Maximus, we can have any parting comments from you that you would like to say?
I'm still new here, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be here, and just looking forward ahead. I do like this study, and I would really support going forward. And some of the things that were brought up with the right of ways for connecting subdivisions and stuff, I personally think in the future that would be a good idea, because the valley's growing. And it will keep growing, and 20 years later, it's still going to keep growing. And if we're going to be raising our families here, I think we should definitely put more time into creating a safer, better place as it's growing. That way, we don't have congestions in certain areas that are getting busier and busier. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Brendan, parting comments, sir? No?
I tend to agree that maybe a little bit more focus on trails or safe pedestrian. We have a lot of fatalities or accidents on some of these areas. Having lived here my whole life, I think a lot about KGB and that area, how it's grown, the potential for a lot more growth and what could be done out there. Connecting them together is huge. But out there and the Big Lake area is like, you throw a rock, you hit a wetland, you hit another marsh, you hit a pond, pick your word, it's all out there. Swamp, wetland, marsh, water. So there's a lot of difficulty out there that we face, and having a plan like this, I think, helps if we take the time to look at it like this and maybe dig a little deeper. That there's other issues that would go into it as well. Schools, are we going to be able to build schools? How are we going to get there to it? With all the pot shops going up, are we 1,000 feet away? Can we build it there? Can we build it here? Oops, a wetland. This is a corridor. This is a collector. There's a lot of struggles. The last census, we grew by 18,000. And I think we're the only area that really grew substantial. So it is something that we need to really look at.
Kurt, parting comments, sir?
I have no comment.
Okay. Stephanie, parting comments?
No, I think when Larry DeVilbiss was mayor, there was a plan that had town sites. So it was to create like a KGB and Fish Creek, and that report is gathering dust, and could have been a real, like, you could have had infrastructure in place instead of, and places for people to go instead of playing catch up and having KGB. I mean, that used to be one way each way and not that much traffic, and I would go out there fishing, and I didn't feel like I was taking my life in my hands. And now I don't quite feel that way. So I think that's important. Like, do people feel safe just driving around the valley? And people tell you, no, I'm white knuckle on Bogart, I'm white knuckle on KGB, and I'm afraid for my kids, like just getting to school. Like, I was over by Colony and talking to people over there, and they got kids crossing at the roundabout in the dark, and the drivers, I mean, that's part of the problem too, is drivers are not respectful at all, not stopping for them. So I think this study is good. I think there's a lot in it. I don't, some things you got to be careful with. You can't take from developers, it's their land. So finding ways to incentivize that stuff, finding ways to incentivize paths, safe shoulders in ways that I think some developers want to do it, but they're like, if the other guys don't have to do it, I'm not going to do it because my house is going to cost more. So I think there's some things in there that are worth looking at, and especially looking at ways that we can provide incentives to do the things we're talking about, not do a taking from, people. If they own 40 acres, they want to develop it, and doing it in ways that don't cost them a lot of money, because that's just not fair. So that's it.
Lynn, parting comments, ma'am?
I just hear cha-ching. There's a lot of money in all of this, and with that in mind, we need some more resource development. We need to grow our economy so we can afford to do some of this stuff. And if we plan ahead, it's much better than being reactionary and then having to, undo some of the development that's done in order to make our way through it to a good straight path. So let's get some resource development going and pay for some of this stuff. Thanks.
Mr. Attorney, do you have parting comments? Mr. Manager, parting comments?
Yeah, just briefly, Mayor, thank you. Through the mayor and I guess this is probably more for the assembly. So what Alex did tonight was gave you an overview. That was all it was intended to be. I know 400 pages is a lot to digest in a short period of time. The intent was just to inform. I think, as a staff, our job is to bring ideas forward and prime the pump. So I would encourage you to think about what you want us to work on. Like, as a staff, we should be working on what you want to work on, what your priorities are. And I think that's what we're looking for, is some clarity around that. There's obviously a lot of stuff in this study. We could do all of it, some of it, none of it. So I would ask the assembly kind of consider that, because we don't want to just chart out on our own and work on what we think we should be working on, when really we should be getting that direction from you. And so the next step for this, Alex will probably bring this forward as an IM, as he mentioned, just to have that on the record for record's sake. And so that'll be the next step. And then beyond that, we will be looking for some direction from the assembly if there's something that you want to, like, for example, if you're like, yes, let's go pick another corridor access management plan and we want to work on this. Great. We're willing to do that. We just need to know what that looks like. So just to be clear on that. And then we already talked about how to pay for it, so I won't chime in on that. And then I wanted to wrap up with this, and I know it has nothing to do with the Planning Commission, but we all live in this community. And so I just want to commend our first responders. We had an active shooter exercise, which is not the most fun thing to talk about, this past weekend. And it was absolutely remarkable to see the community involvement. I mean, we had WPD, PPD, AST, we had the American Red Cross, every borough fire department was represented, even though it was in the Wasilla area. Borough EMS, American Red Cross, the Matsu Borough School District was all in. It was really good to see just the level of collaboration, coordination, and the willingness to prepare. And so I was floored. It was very impressive to see that level of coordination. And one of the gentlemen from the Department of Public Safety said, who sees things statewide, said he had never seen anything on this scale in the state of Alaska. And he sees a lot of exercises and training events from across the state, and was just impressed. So I just want to, as a way to say, publicly, our responders do remarkable work for us every day. Obviously, and I know we appreciate that, but just to see that level of preparedness and the willingness to dive in and work through hard problems like that was just outstanding. So that's all, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Rick, parting comments?
Just thanks for a great presentation, Alex. Appreciate it. Oh,
Thank you.
thank you for a great presentation, Alex. Appreciate it.
Bonnie, parting comments?
I just wanted to mention that last week I told you, the assembly, that we were down 19 hand count officials. We are still down 19 hand count officials. That's almost 7 precincts. So if you guys know anybody that would like to hand count, even people in this room, and I'm looking at Rob Yunt out there, please send them our way because we need them.
Okay, thank you. Max, parting comments?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to have 447 pages dropped in our laps, so I did try to read the whole thing. I didn't get all the way through it. I did warn Alex I was going to grill him ahead of time, but I decided to hold back and not have us here all night. But I will point out that these are the sticky notes that I put in here on the first 100 or so pages that I found some recommendations that I found objectionable because they would mean an erosion of property rights if we were to do them, or increase taxes, or increase spending, growing government. I'm not trying to be hypercritical. I appreciate there's a lot of pages in here that I didn't disagree with. There's a lot of, and I think we do need planning and to figure out how we're going to manage our growth. But there's some things that I did not like very much. One of the things, I'm not going to go through the whole list here. There's like 4 pages here. One of the things I didn't like, we talked about spending some money on purchasing right of way. That's not a bad idea. Page 20 says that we're going to require developers to dedicate some right of way for future road or frontage road expansions. So that's not a great recommendation in my mind when you take land without permission, in order for someone to exercise their property rights. That's just one example of something I don't think should be in this. Yeah, I'm not gonna go through all that. I will be bringing it up to Alex and before we get that IM, and maybe we'll have some edits. I did also want to applaud one thing that I did read in this community growth solution study was they mentioned how Houston, Texas, was the largest metropolitan area that does not have zoning. I was glad that they included that. I did not know that. I did a little bit of research into Houston, Texas. It has the 2nd most affordable housing of any major metropolitan area in the country. Number 1's in Florida. It's the 7th largest metropolitan economy in the country. If it was its own country, it'd be the 27th largest country by GDP. It's the 3rd in the nation for Fortune 500 company headquarters. So I think Houston's doing pretty good. I don't think that we really necessarily need a bunch of zoning as is recommended in this, but that's maybe a discussion for a different time. And then I also wanted to bring up to the assembly, I did share this Alaska Department of Public Safety incident report. You probably were questioning why I shared it. At the last assembly meeting, during public testimony, there was someone who said that they had a $3 million property that was burned, and there was, don't want to get this wrong, I don't want to misquote, there was the implication that it may have been, it could have been arson and politically motivated. If you read the incident report, it involved the person that testified. She testified that the lodge was valued at $900,000, not $3 million, and there was no mention of any malfeasance. There's no suspicion of arson. So I just wanted to, if any of you guys were curious like I was, I asked I asked Mr. Barkley, Ken Barkley, to track this down for me. It was also outside of the Matsu Borough. Thanks.
Bill, parting comments?
Alex, thanks a lot for this report. Yeah, and I'm still trying to digest it also. I do want to reemphasize what Assembly Member Fanov said about recreational vehicles and recreating in the Matsu Borough. It is a very big part of our way of life here in the borough, and I think it needed to be included in the report. Also, while the active shooter event was going on this weekend, the Matsu Health Foundation had a event at Houston High School with the community of Big Lake and the community of Houston, where we got together and spent about 5 hours discussing on what projects the Matsu Health Foundation could fund in each community, $25,000 for each. And after 5 hours, Jordan Lake Park was the project for Big Lake, and Houston chose to start the funding for a community center. But it was really good for the two communities to get together and spend about 5 hours talking about issues and what's important to our communities. And so I just want to thank the Matsu Health Foundation for doing that. Thank you.
Dimitri, parting comments?
Thank you. Max, I was wondering why that report came in front of us, and then I, read through it and some of the things. I did notice that there was some information the way it was presented to us, and what the report said is a lot different. I do think there's one thing it does note in there that the owners were absent, but the dog spared. So if anything, the emotional spawn that was there, that the dog like purposely somebody killed him, I think it's maybe owners were not as responsible. But anyways, that's just a little notes that I noticed from that report. When it comes to some of those things, thank you, Alex. There's a lot to go through, and we're still going to be going through, and I'll probably be on it privately when we connect, picking at it, things in there. I do think there is already a lot of control from the state that have, would be a good example. When state regulates the licenses, the business licenses, we got rid of ours because so that there's not two layers of that, which, they have a system that's in place and good. So if DNR, DEC has system in place for the wells and septic systems, I don't think it's a good idea for us to get into something new completely to have another layer of restrictions, regulations, or making it more complicated. We do know that the wells aquifers change. While, wells could go dry, but that's not necessarily a problem of a neighbor. It happens, the levels change, and you add a redrill or whatever it is, but I don't think it's worth bringing another whole different department or complications, so unneeded focus that we don't have really a problem with. Another thing, I looked at it, some of the details of that plan that were somewhat, I would say, restrictive was, here, I'm gonna pull it up. So mandatory land use permit, I don't know if we're gonna excited to see that. Zoning, I think Max touched on that. Impact fees, that is also a very not an attractive thing, and I don't think that's kind of paints how we would want to approach this. So those are the few things that I disagree with. But there is a few positive things. There are some data that we can probably use when we're going to be working on some kind of ordinance to get something useful out of it. And with that said, thank you so much for everyone that came today.
If there's anybody else have anything else they thought they wanted to bring up that they didn't? Okay, so if there's no objection, we will adjourn at 7:09.